How many are on the governance committee? Is that 4 people or 3? 3.
Well, no, you, Jay, and I are on.
So you have a quorum if you've got 2 then, right?
We do. I'm just texting Joe.
Yeah.
Give him 1 more minute, then we can.
Oh, it's right there.
Yeah, Joe said he's trying to get back in. We can just see if he can dial in.
Doesn't work anymore.
There we are.
I think our camera's dead. We just needed a different one.
Well, that's kind of like a higher resolution camera too.
Oh, wow, it is.
Oh, all right. We need stage makeup for this camera.
I can see the building across the street.
Yeah, I know.
All right.
Well, that's a version of us.
I
I
know.
know. New camera.
And I'm a little close.
Okay, well, at least that wasn't it was the camera's fault.
Right.
So
Yeah.
right.
Great ceiling.
I know,
I
sorry.
like that.
I'm almost done here. There we go.
Nikki Rudd's makeup artist.
Okay.
Right?
Oh my God.
Yeah, you're right. Honey boo boo.
Yikes.
Toddlers and TR.
So Rachel, when's the big date?
Oh, October 23rd.
I thought that was coming up. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you going off to some exotic location, or you can disappear for a couple weeks or something?
No, I'm coming right back.
But yes, the first answer is yes, right?
Well,
New York City.
yeah. Oh, so
Yeah.
we're actually getting married in New York City, but we'll be back by the 20, Monday, actually, I'll be back.
I see.
We're gonna go.
Congratulations. It's exciting.
Thanks, Jack.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Tony.
Where are you going skiing?
Sun Valley.
Oh,
Idaho,
wonderful.
yeah.
That's great.
Joe says he's trying here, so it looks like it's working, but
Is he in the waiting room or something?
yeah, I was just asking.
We have him dial in using the phone number in the Zoom invitation.
It's weird he was on.
No, it bumped him off. Can we just call him?
On the speakerphone?
Yeah.
Could?
I'll give you the number.
That old fashioned technology,
Yeah, those phones.
speakerphone.
Uh, 739 9595. Joe?
Yeah.
Hey, you've got Anna and the COMIDA team here, and we've got governance
Okay,
committee
great,
up on
great,
Zoom. So
Great.
just
Thank you, guys.
all right, great. Can everybody on the Zoom call hear Joe? All right.
Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, Joe, can you hear the folks on the Zoom call? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear everybody.
Okay, all right. Well, just let us know if you're having any issues. We can adjust accordingly. So we've got everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry
So-
about the technical difficulties, Joe.
No problem.
All right, given everybody's here, I will call the meeting to order and ask for approval of our minutes from our September 17th meeting.
I'll make a motion, Jay.
Thank you, Tony. Joe, can you?
Yeah.
I can't hear them at all. Let me.
Oh,
let me try to Zoom one more time.
We can turn it louder too.
Yeah, let me try it one more time. Give me one.
Okay. Sounds like Joe's gonna give the Zoom call one more attempt and then,
Do you have a speakerphone in that room?
yes, yeah, we have one of the handy dandy spider phones here.
Or is that what we dialed them on and you couldn't hear us?
Yes, but we turned the volume. Oh, here comes Joe.
There we go.
All right.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Now I see Jay, I hear everybody, I'm good.
All right.
Great. Joe, I'm gonna hang up here on the speakerphone. Thanks for doing that.
Got it.
All right, fantastic. Joe, we're just approving the minutes from our September 17th minutes. Tony made a motion. Will you second that motion?
Yeah, I second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have approved minutes. When we last left our heroes, we were discussing our draft housing policy. And Anna, Rachel, can you kind of reorient us as to where we were? I have a few of my notes, but just to kind of orient us on, where we left off with our last discussion.
Of course.
Thank you.
So we went into some depth the last time around discussing this proposed policy for housing incentives, and we opted to have another committee meeting to kind of go further into the discussion. As you may recall, Rachel did some due diligence looking at other counties in the state and policies that they have that we might wish to, other IDAs in the state and policies that they have on the books pertaining to housing projects that we may wish to emulate, and just in general did some thinking on what would be practical and feasible as a step forward. And so the proposal that we have on the table here for your consideration is a requirement that any housing project application include an affordable set aside of at least 10%, but that percentage is up to the discretion of this committee and the board, or be located in a blighted or highly distressed area. I believe the requirements up until now are that the project, it doesn't need to have any sort of affordable set aside, and it can be located adjacent to a blighted or distressed area. Is that correct, Rachel?
So when we incorporated the use of highly distressed, we eliminated that adjacent to factor that is in the statute, because based on feedback from the board that wasn't something we wanted to include in our definition of highly distressed, and then also include the blighted area definition as well. So the board has a more subjective criteria to look at when we're looking at the location of a project, and not base it solely on the definition of highly distressed.
So Rachel, I can, that's great. And I see the definition as in footnote 3. So let's just use an example here. What I recall on several occasions was the entire city of Rochester is considered a highly distressed area, even though pockets, I would assert, are not highly distressed. If you look at certain neighborhoods along East Avenue and Park Avenue, and even the Joe, you might argue, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you might argue the neighborhood of the arts where we look at the Stern property.
Yeah, 100%, Jay, 100%.
Would not be a highly distressed. Can you just tell, so is the entire city census tract considered highly distressed, or, would we have the flexibility to look within the city and use our judgment to say, is this housing in a highly distressed area?
So I think what puts the city into the entire city into a highly distressed area is the fact that I believe most of the city sat in an Empire Zone designation. And under the statute, that qualifies as a highly distressed area. You'll notice that I left the qualification of a former Empire Zone out of our definition of highly distressed to eliminate that blanket that sits over the city. So now we're going to need to look, when we say something is highly distressed, we're looking at a slightly different definition than what's in the general municipal law. What we're going to look for is a poverty rate of at least 20% or an unemployment rate of at least 1.25 times the statewide unemployment rate. We could make that or an and that would make it consistent with the statute. And so in order to qualify as a highly distressed area in the city, it would have to have a poverty rate of at least 20% and an unemployment rate of 1.25 times the statewide unemployment rate.
So,
Let me ask you a question, Rachel. So let's say East Avenue, for example. Okay. So the most expensive building that I have in rent is on East Avenue. And it's almost on the corner of East and Prince. So, but I think if you did a demographic study of that area, you're going to suck in part of the neighborhood that's off of Main Street on the other side of Prince Street. So then, so that building would slide under that umbrella, which it really shouldn't.
and
So how
that's
do we avoid that?
how do we give ourselves discretion? Because I think that's really the issue we face is if we look, I mean, if you expand out large enough into the city, you could count any kind of area, particularly like when you get pockets that are really distressed. If we include those areas, I think we can get ourselves a warped sense of what is distressed. Like I said, I mean, the example that I use that always sticks in my mind is when we look at the building we did right at the corner of East and Goodman. I forgot the name of that building. I would tell you that it would be very difficult to argue that that is a highly distressed area. But yet our definition was the way we were defining it at the time, it qualified. And what it basically did is it sometimes ties your hands. Hey, it meets the definition. Why aren't we approving it? I would like to have more discretion on the board that we can use our local knowledge. We can drive by the areas and just say, hey, does this look like a highly distressed area to us? And do we have the ability to dig into more data where the board can say, no, this is not a highly distressed area?
Jay?
Yeah.
Part of going over these new regulations is to stop a project before it gets to the board. Instead of having to argue it prior to somebody coming in.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're doing, right?
I would agree with you, Tony. That would be the ultimate goal, but ultimately it's up to the applicant. I mean, the way I would like to see it work would be that, staff tells the applicant, hey, let's use the one at East and Goodman as an example. Even though it may qualify, the board is going to look at that area and have a real difficult time saying that's a highly distressed area. And we've got to point to historicals or those are conversations among the board that we don't think it's going to have a positive outcome. If the applicant wants to move forward, that's certainly their right to do so. But then we as a board need to say no, even though it's within the city limits, that when we look at that, we don't consider that a highly distressed area.
And Jay, to my point, literally 2 buildings down from where we're talking about is that building that I own on East Avenue. And you know, the rent, the highest rent in that building is like $4,700. I mean,
Right.
that clearly that's not, but under our, if you look at the regulation, it would apply.
Right.
And that's where I'm trying to say we shouldn't be throwing tax credits at those kind of projects.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Joe. I think that's why we're having this discussion, is to allow our hands not to be tied. Because, you know, as you're pointing out, you know, by definition, that area would be looked at as highly distressed, where you're making a very compelling argument, one that I agree with, that is not a highly distressed area. And that, you know, and what we're talking about, the implications are is, hey, if you put up a building right next to yours, or if someone were to, you sold your building and someone rehabbed it, we would have a 10% affordable component there, where if they went 2 blocks on Main Street and didn't, then we may not necessarily require that. Is that?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is that in our definition of highly distressed, we need to make it very clear that it is not a black and white determination, that if they meet the definition, then it qualifies, but rather it highly distressed is, here's what the board will look at to determine highly distressed. It's at the board's discretion, and here are some other factors the board will consider as well. So using your example, Jay, that, let's say that qualifies as a highly distressed area, but we look around, there are no vacant buildings around, the area is otherwise very well developed.
We could
I
look at
think
the
we need
rents. You know, they're looking, I
Right.
mean, they're
Right.
asking 2,500, 3,500 for rents. That's a huge indicator that is not a highly distressed area.
Right. That's really all you have to do.
Look at the rents.
Look at the rents,
Correct.
look at the pricing. Yeah.
Look
mean-
at look at the rents in the proposed building, and then you could look at rents in buildings very, very close. And then you can also look at vacancy rate. And if it, I mean, that'll tell you the story.
Yeah.
So I think, to Jay's point, Rachel, I think that it's got to be discretionary. There's got to be some level of discretion the board can use, because if it qualifies and the applicant insists on coming in front of us, and it is a building that we know is a strong building, and the rent is high, then you know, we should be able to use our discretion to say, you know, we're not going to do that.
I think that's where the board does add some value, you know, I mean, so really.
Could I just ask a question?
Please.
2 questions. Rachel, when you were looking at the other IDAs around the state, did you see any of them that came up with the same concerns that we have? That we don't want to award incentives to areas that, you know, they're not divided, they're not in a distressed area, they don't have, you know, rents above a certain benchmark? Or did you see anything like that? So measurement tools, if you will, to identify pockets.
Not that I recall. I can go back and look. As I recall, the criteria that I saw out of most other IDAs was the affordable set aside.
Mhm.
And that being the requirement to do a housing project. I can tell you, like, for Ontario County, for example, has only the affordable requirement, but Ontario County is a differently situated county, right? They don't have a major metropolitan area like we do in Monroe County, where certain pockets of it, like the East End, are very well developed now. They weren't 5 years, it wasn't 5 years ago. And other parts of it are not as well developed. State Street, you know, we're seeing some projects coming up on State Street. So I'll go back and look, but I do not remember in my research seeing much about blight in highly distressed areas. But what I am hearing is we need to make the language sufficiently broad and make it clear that the board has discretion in the determination of blight and highly distressed. And it is not, you qualify, you're in, this is a criteria, and here are the other things the board are going to look at, and it's not an exhaustive list of things the board will look at to make the determination about the area in which the project is located.
I think that's right, Rachel, that.
Yeah, I do too, Rachel. That's spot on.
Yeah, that,
And looking at these other IDAs, do any of them have publicly available information about how they're monitoring and enforcing the policies, or is that not available?
That wasn't readily available.
Okay.
So
That was
I got something interesting for everyone. I contacted a member of the IDA board in Westchester. We do a lot of insurance down there, and we've insured projects that have gotten benefits. So they were kind enough to put me in touch with somebody down there. And and again, I'm not saying we should do what they do. I'm just bringing up what they're doing. It's just food for thought, right? But I think they do a very good job based off of what I've seen. And their criteria is spelled out. And then again, it's discretionary, because like Monroe County, there's parts of Westchester where the buildings are super, super expensive, super high end, and you can go 3 blocks south and you're in a very bad area. So they use discretion in that regard. Also, like us, but they did it some years ago. They put a piece in there for low income and senior living. And it's interesting how they did it. They didn't do a percentage, Jay, because like somebody would come to them with, a 10-unit building to get a discount and get the benefits on the property taxes, and they would only give one apartment for low income. So that IDA looked at it and said, we're not going to do that anymore, because we're giving away X amount of dollars in benefits for one apartment. It doesn't make sense. Or if there's only 30 apartments, we're giving away that much money out of our tax pool that should be in the tax pool, that essentially would lower effective tax rates if the money was there, and it's not there. And the example that the gentleman that I spoke to used was, they had a project that was 30 units, and they were going to get 3 low-income apartments out of 30 units. And, it was a pretty big tax benefit. And tax rates, as you know, down there are pretty high. So what they did is they did a minimum. They did either 10% of the overall building or 10 units, whichever is more. So if an apartment complex comes in front of them with 30 units, they have to make a third of it low income, or low income / senior, both, or they don't do it.
yeah,
If it's a large project, then the 10% number holds. So that's how they do it. So I thought that was an interesting way to do it, and I thought it was a good way to
I think,
make sure you're getting a big bang for your, whatever benefits you're getting. We're getting a good benefit for the community.
yeah, you know what, Joe, that is an interesting way to do it. I don't know that I would support that right now, just simply because, using the examples that you had, right? If somebody had a 10-unit building, they'd have to make it all low income or affordable housing in order to get the benefits. What I don't know is, we want to encourage, people to come and do these projects. What I would advocate is, this is the first time we're doing it. I'd advocate, let's stick to the 10% number. Let's see how it goes, and let's reevaluate after 24 months and see how it's working and if it needs tweaks. I mean, we don't need to get this all right on the first attempt. If we can then, if we're seeing, hey, at the end of the day, we put this 10% requirement in, and everything is like Alan Stern, like, you know what? It hasn't created any issues whatsoever. then maybe we can go a little bit further and then that's a really good piece of data that, hey, these benefits are so attractive, we can get some more public benefit out of it. But I say, let's start somewhere and, for lack of a better place, 10% seems to be doesn't seem to really impact these things, but we'll find out. So,
Well,
Yeah, it's
You know, Jay,
sufficiently
that-
conservative.
yeah,
Right.
that's a conservative approach. It makes sense to me. I'm just thinking,
yeah, no, I mean, I
I-
love that idea. Like, let's go as far as we can. We don't want to impact development, but we want to get the maximum public benefit out of it.
right.
And we just don't know what works in Monroe County. So, my opinion is let's start somewhere and then let's make changes based on real data that we get.
I just think, Jay, that 10% is just too low. You get a 10%, you get a project with 10 units, you get one low income housing project.
Yeah.
And then that developer gets 10 years of property tax benefits.
You
And
know
it
what?
for one apartment. So I just disagree with it. I just don't think it's enough. I don't think you're getting enough benefit to the community for the benefit you're given.
You might be right, Joe. My opinion is to answer, from one thing I would say is that's one more apartment than we're getting now, than our current policy. So it's a step in the right direction. And then I would say you may be right. And you're way closer to this than I am. So my opinion is let's try it and let's revisit this policy in 12 to 24 months. If we're seeing no impact on deal flow, then I think the position you're taking, Joe, is certainly right. And we can go, hey, maybe we go up to 15%, or maybe we look and say, hey, it's a minimum of 3 apartments or 10%.
But
We can always
my
tweak
question
it.
is, when the applicant comes in and talks to the staff, what is the staff supposed to tell
Right now,
them? Yeah,
assuming we do the 10%, I will state this as what I believe, and then, we can have a discussion, but the first litmus test they look at is, are you proposing something in a distressed area or not? So if you get into the suburbs of Monroe County, those are not distressed areas. There might be one or two, but people can correct me, but if you're not in a distressed area, the board is going to require a 10% affordable housing set aside based on 60 or 80% of median household income. And, we'll get into that portion of the discussion. So that's cut and dry. If you're not in a distressed area, bam, you need to come up, you need to do 10% in order to get benefits. And we can put in a minimum of 10%, but, I think everyone will come back at the minimum. If you are in a distressed area, the board will entertain not having the 10% affordable set aside, but the board's going to look at within distressed areas, it's not uniformly distressed. There are pockets of distressed areas, for instance, the city of Rochester, that clearly are not distressed. The board will also look at things like, what are the rents that you're asking? What is the neighborhood? And they will take that into consideration before approving benefits. There's certain things that are cut and dry. You're in the northwest quadrant, that's going to be easy. It's really going to be in the southeast quadrant that I think we're going to have some, we're going to have to look at those a little bit harder. And so I will throw that out.
Depending on where the project is, you don't even need to mention a low income piece of it, because if it truly is in an area that's struggling, or that is, a low income area, that's where the rent's going to be anyway. Agreed. So if a building is built, like the Stern building, for instance, if that project is in an area like that, you can get good rents for it. So that's the type of area where we have to have discernment where we can say, yes, we like it. No, we don't. And what's the rent base for this building? And yes, we need X amount of units for low income. And again, moving forward, I'm not going to vote for a project that has no real benefit to the community, and all we're doing is helping somebody's bottom line. It's ridiculous.
I think you gotta remember also, when you say benefit to the community, we're representing people coming in wanting to get a tax credit, but we're also representing the people of the county. And some of the people of the county might want to take a shift and move from the city to Webster or Chi-Li, so I think Jay's approach is, I guess, okay for now.
Yeah.
I-
It's only,
I
the only
think-
thing that I would argue is to your point, if people want to move from the city to the suburbs, the developers will follow. That's the market. And let the market go where the market goes. Why do they need our help? You know,
Exactly.
if they
I
need our
agree.
help, the residents of Monroe County should get a benefit out of this. You know, and that's, I think, Joe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what you're saying, and which I agree with.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Because keep in mind, right? Every dollar that you take out of the property tax pool, effectively, it raises the rate. Every dollar you put into it lowers the effective tax rate. So, in helping one project and one developer, you're causing everybody that lives in that area will either pay the same or more that they were paying before. Or if that developer has a profitable project in a good area, that project should be adding dollars into the property tax pool, effectively lowering tax rates for everybody in the area.
Yeah.
And every time that we get involved and we pull that money out of the tax pool artificially, you're hurting everybody in that area. And not only that, now you're not even providing low income. So it's a bottom line play. And that's something that I'm not, I've got way better things to do with my time than get involved in doing assistant projects like that. So I think, I think that's the right thing and that's why, Jay, I was saying, I think 10% works for the right size project, but for some of these little projects, if you go handing $300,000 in tax benefits and they're giving, 2 low income apartments, you're right. It's 2 more than we had before, but at what cost?
Yeah, and you might be right, Joe.
You're better off letting that developer put that couple $100,000 into the property tax pool and either keeping property taxes where they are so they don't go up, or lowering them if you get enough money into that tax pool. So that's kind of where my head's at.
No, and you're bringing up a fair point. I just think, Joe, just it's baby steps. You guys were talking about baby steps on a different topic when I jumped on, but I think let's try this and let's evaluate. This isn't we're not writing this in stone. Let's move in the right direction, and then see what the data comes back and says, and then make adjustment as necessary.
I have a question, because with the Stein property, where did the 10% come from? Is that something that we had on the books?
It was not on the books. It came from dialogue over time and in our conversations with developers about housing projects without having a policy. It had been determined in some cases that 10% was a good benchmark.
Compromise. Yeah.
Yeah, compromise, right?
Mhm.
And if you remember how that
With 10%.
yeah, and if you remember how that conversation went down, we were originally talking about 5%, and they came back and said, yeah, we'll do 5%. originally it was, hey, this project can't support any affordable housing. The numbers just don't
Right.
work.
Right.
Remember, that's where we started. Then it was, hey, we rejected the project and we said, we'd like to see 5%, 5 to 10%. And the developer came back and said, we'll do 5%. And then I think Rachel and Anna said, well, no, I think the board would really like to see 10. So they came back at 10% without really batting an eyelash. So I think that's where the 10% came, that we feel like, hey, that's a good starting point.
All
Could
right.
be higher, could be higher. We may want to tweak it to Joe's point, but I think
And-
that's where I feel comfortable at least starting out. And we've had 2 or 3 projects come in subsequent to that. I really haven't had an issue with the 10%. The one project that didn't want to do the 10%, which I think was the Reedman property out in Pittsburgh, but they
Right.
went forward anyway. And so they're going to be on basically full taxes. So that's to Joe's point. They didn't need it. They didn't want to do it. They're paying full taxes, but the project
Well,
went forward.
Yeah, and the reason I make these suggestions to you is because I own these projects. So
Yeah.
I know what the profit margin is. I know they're profitable without any benefits. So, you know, if you are going to pass along benefits, let's just make sure, like anything else that you do, right? You want to get the most bang for your buck. And I think when we give a benefit away, we're affecting the taxpayer. We just need to make sure we affect the taxpayer in a positive way, giving the money away. And that's where my head is at. And I think, and again, Jay, I think if you want to try 10%, I don't agree with it. I don't think 10% is enough. Like across the board, I think you need to have a minimum number of units, and then it jumps up to 10%. Because again, you could have somebody come in and do, you know, like that project I own in East Avenue. That's, you know what the old Boy Scout building is? Does everybody know where that is? Like it's right off of like Prince Street in East Avenue. So I own that building, and that building, there's only 9 units there. But the rents are very high there. The apartments are huge. So if I came in front of the board, it is in an area that would apply. I could give one apartment and cut the rent, you know, in half, and then the benefit is huge to me. So, and I'm just not sure that benefit is good enough for giving one apartment back, so that, you know, in low income housing. That's why I think we should add a minimum number and then go to 10%.
And you may be right, Joe. Like I said, I just want to play it conservative and reevaluate this after a 12 to 24 month period. And, you know, then it'll just make me more comfortable. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to go too far too fast. So
I was also going to say, Jay and Joe and Tony, you know, we can't forget that a lot of the properties we're working on have been vacant for many years. They haven't been generating any revenues to the community at all in terms of a tax base. So there's a balance. And that's generally often the projects that we're working on to rehabilitate these older buildings and so forth. So that's a big benefit to be generating those revenues in communities where, you know, that property has just been off the tax rolls for many, many years. So we shouldn't lose sight of that. I don't know. I would like to, it's not my committee, but I'm an interloper. How does the staff feel about this business of, we can still use our interpretation, we can still use our discretion? I mean, does that make you uncomfortable that when you talk to proposed developers that they say, well, here's the rules, but, you know, the board may still want to give it more scrutiny?
I think, you know, from my perspective, it's a mixed bag, because on the one hand, we prefer there to be some degree of black and white certainty where we look at a project application and we say, nope, this one does not qualify. Oh, yes, this one does qualify. And we recommend to the board accordingly. However, you know, we want to give the board the ability to weigh in on projects' viability and the public benefits thereof, beyond what's reflected in the numbers in the application. In my conversations with the county executive about COMIDA modernization and changes, he really just said, you know, the bottom line is when you give public incentives, public benefits to a project, he wants to see there be some spillover effect into the community where the project is located. He wants to see reinvestment. And a lot of that is, it falls into a gray area and it's worthy of questions and input from the board. You know, I don't want to speak for Robin and Rachel. You know, they're looking at applications, and certainly we prefer some degree of simplicity where we think, okay, green light for this one, red light for this one. But when projects land in the laps of our volunteer board members, you know, you're not here just to rubber stamp projects. You're here to provide, you know, feedback and input. You're hand selected by local leaders for this service. So that's my.
Yeah,
It's a good-
I think that was perfectly said.
Yes, absolutely.
Perfectly said. And it came up at the conference last week about the boards being engaged and not being rubber stamped and having meaningful discussions around projects. So Anna's absolutely right. She hit the nail on the head. It would be great. And in most instances, we can say this qualifies, this doesn't. But housing, I think we'll welcome a discussion on it from the board. And I think, to Jay, your point, let's try it and see how it goes. And a conservative approach to start, I think, is prudent. We don't want to have a chilling effect on projects, and, you know, developers that have been fantastic partners with the IDA over many years. We don't want to have a chilling impact on those projects. So
Let me ask another question. We don't want to negotiate, I don't think, in these live meetings. So
Right.
our policy says 10% is good, but one of the board members is, well, would you be willing to do 30, you know, or 25%? That's where I think, I don't know, that might be difficult on the developer and on our decision making if we have one or two people trying to sort of negotiate a better deal in their minds.
I agree with you.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. So, I mean, you know, I just, before I get to that, Rachel, just to build on what you and Anna said, I think it's easy to do black and white when the situation calls for black and white. When you look at the city, I don't think it is black and white. So that's why I think the board has to exercise some discretion, because there are projects that, you know, I had trouble looking at myself in the mirror saying that these are distressed areas. And that's not a good feeling for me. And I'm sure Joe's not, you know, feeling the same way. So I don't think we can't look at the city and say it is uniformly a distressed area. So the board.
Well, Jay, I have feelings too.
I'm sorry, Tony. I'm sorry, Tony.
Go
and
for
I'm-
it, Tony.
Yeah, and I don't want to discount my colleague Tony's feelings too.
Oh,
But when you have a situation that is not black and white, that's why the board is here, to exercise those discretion. And it should not be surprising to developers, because when they go before planning boards, those are not black and white. And the boards do exercise discretion, and the boards do ask for certain things in order to get approval. So I don't think the developers will find this shocking that, hey, you know, in these certain areas, this is not clean. The board is going to ask for some questions, or they're going to look at this deeper. And I think, you know, Robin and Allison and the rest of the staff, I think they have a pretty good sense when a project is not in a distressed area. I mean, we're really talking the southeast quadrant of the city as, I think, the big, you know, when projects are there, that's where we're going to want to take a deeper dive into that. Now, having said that, I agree with Ann, we should not be negotiating in the meetings. That being said, if a developer really wants to help and tilt their, help their cause. Let's say they are doing something in the, along East Ave or along Park Ave, and they say, you know what, I do want to go forward. I would be comfortable if Robin and Allison said, hey, look, the board's going to have a really tough time with this. If you want to get this through, you're going to have to go to more than 10%, or, you may want to go in and say, we're going to do 20% or 30%. And that may, that may sway the board.
It sets a precedent for the staff negotiating, and I don't think that's the right thing for the staff to do.
I disagree, Tony. I think if somebody if there's a project that is a borderline project or doesn't meet the criteria, that if they're willing to come forward and offer more of a public benefit, I'd look at that.
Well, I think Anna,
But I'll throw that out to, what the rest of the, group says.
I think Anna really put it eloquently in that we have to see what projects come and offer 10% or at the start.
I think, Jay, I agree with what you just said. I think the staff, by the way, does an amazing job. And I don't think too many IDA boards are lucky as we are to have the staff that we have.
Agreed.
And I think that when an application comes in, they know what, I think they have, their finger on the pulse of the board, and they know where we are and where we're leaning and what direction we would go in. And I think they could tell a developer, like if I was a developer and I came to them, I would want them to tell me, look, I'm going to tell you, you're probably going to have a hard time with this. You want to put it in, you can, but here's what I think they would want to see. And I don't necessarily think that's negotiating. I think it's more guidance. And I think as long as we have discretion, that we can say that area is not distressed, and look, one apartment doesn't work, and we can have that discussion prior to the meeting, like when we have our meetings to go over what the applications look like. That's when we need to have those discussions, not at the meeting. To Ann's point, which Ann is a really good point. So yeah, and look, it's a step in the right direction, so that's good.
Yeah. Anna, what's your thought on that? Like when, the projects that are either black or white, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about stuff in the gray area,
Right.
where the board, it's an uncertainty. But, how would you feel about yourself, Rachel, Robin, anyone on staff saying, hey, look, 10% is not going to get this done. You're going to have to offer more. And because the board, I will tell you, the board will not accept 10% in this, or, will not consider this a distressed area. If you want to try and get this approved, what else can you offer? And it'd be good to get
I feel
that data.
confident in our ability to administer more than just a sniff test. We're already doing that.
Mhm.
And the only thing that's precluding us from getting more into the weeds of some of these project applications as they come up is that we don't have an existing policy on the books.
Right.
We're just sort of, well, yeah, we don't have a rule for that, but our board prefers.
Yeah.
And so I think it would give us some semblance of it sets a policy, it's a value statement. And, certainly if a project comes to us like that, like that condo development out by Oak Hill, where it's very clearly, in a well-to-do area, no affordability.
Not in the distressed part of Pittsburgh.
And even right. And even that 10% threshold would barely scratch the surface of making a difference in that particular community or in Monroe County. We can push back. This gives us license to push back. And it also gives the board license to have more of a hand in how these projects are impacting the community that we serve.
And it also will give us data. If we're
Mhm.
seeing some of these things that we can get higher percentages, it goes to Joe's point. You know, it will help guide us in the future based on real and, real actual projects. So I know we've only got 5 minutes left here. I think we're closer. I mean, I think where we've netted out is I'm going to summarize that we're going to say, hey, 10% if you're in a non-distressed area. If you're in a distressed area, we'll look at waiving that 10%, but we're going to look at some other data points to make sure that that where the project is truly a distressed area.
Robin,
Mhm.
are there any apartment projects coming up?
Why, yes.
Oh,
Well, yes, and I'm sitting here in my head listening to all this, trying to figure out how, so to Joe's point, we do what he was saying. We do say, the board will look for this, you need to have this. We already are comfortable doing that, but like Anna said, now that we'll have something to fall back on, will be very helpful for us. Project, I can share the project now, right? It'll be
Absolutely,
public, it'll be in the paper on Friday, the public notice. So the project is down here on State Street across from the Kodak headquarters building. It's a vacant building right now, and they are the developer, it's a developer not local out of New York City, buying it and turning it into 11 market rate apartments. We talked to him about having an affordable set aside of at least 10%. He's almost there. I think he's kind of not quite understanding a little bit about what I'm asking. But what made me a little nervous, I was talking to Rachel about kind of on the side here, is the rents are high. Like, so what I would worry about from me is I'm saying, okay, you need to have at least 10% of your 11 units, which would be one, as affordable. But then are you as a board going to look at his rents and then not like that? I guess I'm concerned about what we're advising as staff, and then the board kind of not agreeing with that's what I'm worried about.
No, so Robin, on that, what we're looking for is a 10% affordable component. So if their market rents were really low, then we would argue that, hey, that's a distressed area and you don't need to do 10%. You can have all 11 be, let's say rents were $600 a month, then that one, Tony, let me finish. So on that one, then they could get away without doing any affordable component.
Understood.
But now that the rents are where they are, they're high, you're doing exactly what we would expect. Is like, hey, even though this may be considered a distressed area, if you go a few blocks, north of there, given the rents, it's clearly not an affordable unit. You're getting pretty good rents. So the board's going to want to see 10% or one unit as a set aside for someone in the 60 to 80% household income.
that's good.
And if that comes before us, I'm ready to approve that. That's exactly what we want with this policy.
And to Ann's point, this building's vacant.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is
It's
great.
vacant. It's not in good shape. The facade is a mess, and it's a father and son. This is not a big New York City
No, yeah.
developer. This is a father and son investing in one small piece of property in Rochester because they heard it was a nice place to invest.
It is a nice place to invest.
It's a lovely place to invest. So we had a Zoom call as a young man, very ambitious. So I think that you'll like him. I think you'll like the project. He's unfamiliar with IDAs, but that's okay. Like, it's good to have a new face in front of these boards. But we got a little pause when we saw the rents, and we can tell you the size of the units range from 480 square feet
For a studio.
for a studio to a 1-bedroom at 642 square feet and a 2-bedroom at about 800 square feet. And the rents in that, so $1,350 for the studios, $1,650 for the 1-bedroom, and $1,800 for the 2-bedroom. But we did push him to have the affordable set aside, and as we mentioned, the building vacant. in desperate need of repair.
Well, all right. Well,
Yeah,
I think
and
we're
I
all
think
in,
that's,
Mhm.
go ahead, Tony, I'm sorry.
I think we're all in agreement on that building, so.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, the vacant buildings and everything, the price will reflect it. The price will reflect the amount of work that needs to go into it. That's how the market will
That's true.
dictate it.
Yeah.
So, to summarize, I think it seems to me we've coalesced around the 10% number, and the board having discretion in non-distressed areas. And the 10% in distressed areas, the board will exercise some discretion based on, what the project looks like, what the neighborhood is, and what will tell the story. And I think absolutely is the rents. What is the rents? What are the vacancy rates in the area, et cetera? But we'll look at that if a project is in a distressed area to determine whether the 10% applies. If,
Great, great.
the only thing that I would like to have one more meeting on is to discuss the 60 to 80% household income number. Prior to that meeting, could we get data on what are those thresholds for household incomes, both in the city and within the county?
Yeah.
And I don't know how fine we have that, but I would like to see that. And I know it goes by household size, right?
Yeah.
So I would love to see that, just because I want to make sure that's very transparent to the board. I think, to me, that's the only thing that remains for us to finalize the policy, unless Joe, Tony, you guys are seeing something different.
No, I'm good.
No, I'm good with that. And that's exactly what we need to do, Jay.
Okay. So,
Okay, so we'll revise the policy based on this and recirculate it, and then we'll schedule another meeting.
yeah, so I think it gets very simple. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
paragraph.
Yep.
So, yeah, and then we'll kind of hone in on the 60 to 80% number, but I just want to have that information in front of me before we agree to that.
Got it.
All right.
So, yeah, if we can get that information, and then Robin, if I can ask you to schedule one more meeting once that's circulated, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Is there any other business?
Sounds good.
Thank you, everyone, for your input, and have a great rest of the day.
Well, don't you have
Thank you,
to,
everyone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I need a motion. Thank you, Tony, keeping me honest here. I need a motion to
Of
adjourn.
course.
I know.
I'll motion.
Thank you, Joe.
second.
Anyone opposed to adjourning?
All right.
All right, we are
Thanks so
adjourned.
much.
Now enjoy the rest.